YouTube, with the 2024 NBA offseason fast approaching and free agency being obviously one of the more exciting parts of it, I want to go through in this video the top NBA free agents set to be on the open market or test in the open market for the 2024 offseason. I'm going to go through about 30 or so of these players, what I think, their value could be on the open market, what they do great, and what teams they might fit on for the upcoming 2024 free agency. Let's just get straight into it, folks. So before I get into the video, I do want to mention, I will be also discussing players that potentially could be on the move, starting with our first guy. Some of these players do have player options, so it could be complicated whether they leave or not, but I do have to mention them because they are notable for the guys I put on the list. The first one being the greatest player of this generation, LeBron James, who is set to be an unrestricted free agent in 2024 on the move from LA. If he declines his player option, that could be a reality. Now, I don't expect him to leave LA. I think the situation there is just more likely that he sticks around for the Lakers, but if he does go in free agency, I would expect him to get a max contract from the Philadelphia 76ers, not just because I'm a Sixers fan, because that team makes the most sense in the open market for LeBron. If he were to leave LA, you could see maybe a trade type scenario with the Cleveland Cavaliers if something like that was going to happen. For all things considered, I think he's just going to stick around in LA, but it is a name obviously worth noting. That's the king. The hot ticket item on the free agency market in 2024 is going to be Paul George. Now, there just were reports about a day ago at the time of recording this video of Paul George wanting to stay in LA, contrary to what we thought leading up to this offseason, and LA does have the resources to be able to sign him to a max contract. So if they want to, they can. That'd be a real bummer for teams like mine in the 76ers who have the max money to be able to pay a guy like Paul George, and him being probably the best guy that was supposed to be a free agent would really be great for the Clippers if they could keep him around, but it would likely have to be a max contract. We'll have to see how that plays out, but Paul George being the best free agent on the market in my opinion, if he is in fact on the market. Two other guys I think are worth noting, although I do expect them both to return to their respective teams, and that is Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby, both of them being former Toronto Raptors. And these players are really dynamic two-way players. Pascal being the better of the two in my opinion, super underrated guy, and obviously in the Eastern Conference Finals right now as I speak with the Indiana Pacers. I would expect him to stick around in Indiana. They gave up a lot to get him, and they have the cap to be able to re-sign him, so why not, right? OG Anunoby, same deal. He makes a lot of sense with the Knicks. He fit in great there in New York, had a great playoff run with them. I don't expect OG to leave that team, and I don't expect the Knicks to lowball him in free agency. I think OG sticks around in New York, although I do have to mention those two guys. So those are the top, tier of free agents in my opinion. If, a lot of these guys even are free agents at the end of the, season, I think it's more likely than not that all of those players, maybe other than Paul George, stick around with their teams. Paul George being the most interesting to me because, he has the most options out of anybody in my opinion, other than LeBron, but I do think all of those guys, maybe other than Paul George, will stick with their teams. Now we get into the next tier of guys that are maybe like, really good options, not quite worth max money, that do provide a lot of versatility and dynamic ability to a team. Like I said, aren't really max guys anymore, and maybe they come with a little baggage. Starting with 76ers fan favorite, James Harden. I expect James Harden to re-sign with the Clippers, considering how many draft picks they gave up to get him. He actually had a pretty good year with them, all things considered. Talked about this before quite a lot, but James Harden clearly not a max guy anymore in free agency, and I expect him to sign maybe a really short-term deal, maybe like a 1 or 2 year deal with, pretty good money, like about $30 million a year, around what he's making now, but nothing crazy, and I do expect him to stay with the Clippers, as for one, not a lot of people would be willing to take on James Harden for that amount of money anymore after what he's done from each team he's been on, and two, it just makes sense for the Clippers to want to keep him around, as he is still a really good player and a dynamic offensive game changer, but he does come with some things, and I would expect the Clippers to want to put up with them after they gave up so much to get him. Klay Thompson obviously is going to be a name floating around quite a bit in free agency. He's going to get a big contract. I don't think it's going to be with the Warriors. I think his days in Golden State are over. That dynamic dynasty, trio could be on the move in regards to their second best option in Klay Thompson over the years. Klay Thompson, 4-time champion, still one of the greatest shooters in the NBA. It'd be interesting to see where he lands. He is a natural fit for pretty much every team. You could always use a guy like Klay Thompson no matter what team it is, no matter how much shooting you have, you can't have enough. And like I said, Klay Thompson is still one of the best shooters in the entire NBA. Does come with some issues. He's getting older. He's not quite the defender he once was. And he honestly is a little bit inconsistent from time to time, as we saw in the 2023 play-in game, where he did score, I believe, 0 points. So, Klay is a little bit rocky. Definitely not a max player, and he won't get anywhere near a max in my opinion, but he will get a multi-year contract with somebody for a pretty sizable amount of money. Number 3 option type money from 20 to 30 million a year for probably about 3 or 4 years in my opinion. We'll have to see where that is, but wherever he goes to, the team could definitely use his, veteran leadership, championship experience, and elite all-time great shooting shooting. DeMar DeRozan is another guy that I think is being a little slept on in this free agent market. You know, DeMar is an all-star type talent, still at his age of 34, still putting up around 24 points per game on decent efficiency. The problem with DeMar DeRozan is that he doesn't shoot three-pointers very often, and when he does, they don't go in very often. So DeMar, you kind of have to live with the fact that, you know, he's going to be a pretty ball-dominant guy that can't really provide much off the ball offensively. But when he does have the ball, he is a really, really great just get a bucket guy, the master of the mid-range, the midi magician, whatever you want to call him. Dude just is a walking bucket, obviously, but you know, the floor spacing, he does have to fit a certain type of team, and that's going to limit his value in my opinion, because he's not just a seamless fit wherever he goes. It's going to have to be a team that needs his services specifically, and you know, I would expect him to get similar type of contract to Klay Thompson. You know, he's 34, still an all-star type talent. The fit has to be specific, and I would expect a 20 or $30 million payday per year wherever he goes. Still a great offensive player. Miles Bridges is an interesting candidate. You know, this guy is still young. He's still, you know, really, you could argue, hasn't even hit his prime. You know, really athletic guy that, you know, gets up and down the floor. Really good scorer. You know, this guy has averaged 20 points a game. Maybe not the most efficient player offensively, but you know, he has up to his shooting in my opinion, and could really provide a good athletic, you know, forward for a team looking for a dynamic offensive option in the front court. You know, obviously there's a lot of off-court issues with Miles Bridges, so you don't want to maybe commit to a big long-term type extension, as you would think, just looking at a player of his talent, age, and production on paper, like his stats. But we'll have to see what happens with Miles Bridges. You know, one of the more interesting free agents, because you know, his value is going to be really unpredictable. You know, I could see a team, maybe a younger team, taking a shot on him if he leaves Charlotte in the free agency with a big payday. But I could also see him, you know, maybe getting like a 1-year prove it type deal to maybe see if he can kind of stay out of trouble and still provide the same type of production in a different setting and adjust to that, you know, type of situation. So we'll have to see what happens with Miles Bridges, but definitely a name to keep your eye on. Definitely one of the best free agents on the market, but you know, he comes with a lot of things, so we'll have to see. Malik Monk is one of the best, you know, most underrated players in the entire NBA. You know, Malik Monk is one of the most dynamic shooters in the league. He's a really great floor spacer, man. His range is seemingly unlimited and has really taken leaps in his playmaking and defense as well over the years. I think Malik Monk is one of the more slept on free agents on the market. He could be due for a close to $100 million type payday is what they're saying, and I think Sacramento is going to do everything they can to keep him around. I expect Malik Monk to stay in Sacramento. Nick Claxton, another guy that's super young and super talented, primarily on the defensive end of the floor. Guy is a dynamic, game-changing defender, a real lob threat and athlete in the front court, but an all-NBA defense type player who I think, you know, if the right setting opens itself up to a center like Nick Claxton, I think you have to shell out whatever you can. The guy's young. If he's expected to leave Brooklyn, which, you know, I would try to keep that guy around if I'm Brooklyn, man. He is young, athletic, and, you know, primed to be a center of the future type player. I really think you have to see what you have if you're Brooklyn with Nick Claxton. I think he's a guy you got to hang on to, but he is going to want a lot of money because, you know, he should, right? I have to see what happens with Nick Claxton, but a great talent that I think, you know, could be due for a big payday, whether it's Brooklyn or anywhere else. So now we're starting to get into more, you know, role player, but really, you know, good upside or dynamic role player territory, where these guys are really great role players, or maybe even really young guys with a lot of potential, but, you know, at the end of the day are role players. So obviously their market is going to be a little bit less than guys like DeMar DeRozan or, you know, Malik Monk or Klay Thompson or James Harden would be, but, you know, these guys definitely are worth paying attention to and could really help a contender with their skill set. Let's start with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who does have a player option, you know, for $15 million with the Denver Nuggets. But if I'm KCP, you know, if I'm focused on getting as much money as I can, which who isn't in this world, right? I'm looking at that $15 million and I'm saying I can do better than $15 million next season, and I can do it for maybe 3 straight years. I think the best thing for him to do is test the open market and just see how high that value goes, because one of the more dynamic and great role players in this league, and I expect him to at least decline his player option if he doesn't stick around in Denver. That'll be interesting to see. D'Angelo Russell, you know, had a great second half of the season. Another guy that's a little bit inconsistent at times in the playoffs, but is still a quality offensive player from that point guard position. The guy definitely has value. Let's put it that way. I know Lakers fans have been up and down, rocky relationship with him, but listen, he has a player option this year that, you know, he definitely could decline and test the open market. Depends what happens with the Lakers. The Lakers are in a weird spot offseason wise. We'll have to see, but definitely a guy worth considering if you're looking for an offensive minded point guard. Isaiah Hardenstein is maybe the best big on the market other than, you know, Nick Claxton. I think the guy is probably as good as he's going to get in this league, but already with the Knicks last season had a tremendous breakout type season as a starting caliber 5 in this league, in my opinion. You know, the guy provides high energy, high rebounding, has that little floater that killed my Sixers throughout the playoffs. Got some offensive around the basket stuff. He's a big body, high energy, hustle guy. You know, he gets up and down the floor really well and appears to be a pretty smart player. So I think Hartenstein is going to be a top priority for the Knicks to keep around, along with teammate OG Anunoby in this free agency. Hartenstein could get a 4-year, $60 million type contract. I think you got to keep him around if you're the Knicks. The next 4 guys I'm about to mention are all pretty good role players in their own right, and they all played for my Philadelphia 76ers last season. I could see all of these guys fitting in really well in a lot of different places. These are guys that you just always love to have, starting with Buddy Hield, one of the greatest shooters of this era, you know what I mean? And I don't say that lightly. If you just look at the numbers, he really is. Had some up and down moments with my Sixers after the trade from Indiana, but honestly, this is a type of shooter that, the league just doesn't have a lot of, right? He is one of those guys that you just can't duplicate, right? Like, there are maybe 5 Buddy Hield type shooters in this league. One of them is Klay Thompson, you know what I mean? One of them is Steph Curry. One of them is Michael Porter Jr., right? Like, you can't find a lot of shooting just like Buddy Hield provides. And while he is a different type of shooter as some of those guys, he is still as consistent and great at shooting as those guys are, generally. Buddy Hield is certainly a guy any team would love to have. Like I said, you can always have more shooters, and you always need more shooters, right? Definitely expect him to get some good offers on the market. Anthony Melton is probably the best of this bunch in terms of value right now. I think he might get the most money out of any free agent the Sixers have, because D'Anthony Melton, he had a really bad back injury throughout the season, really kept him sidelined a lot, didn't really play in the playoffs, and was kind of disappointing. But he is a great player to have, as a connector and a role player of your team. I'm telling you guys, I watched this guy for the past couple years, man. The guy is an awesome talent that you want on your team. I don't care who you are. For one, he's really young, and 2, he is a two-way versatile player. You know what I mean? His field goal percentage, it looks lower than it is. I think Nick Nurse asked him to do a lot of driving to the basket this year, which isn't really his strong suit, and kind of took a dip in his field goal, but he is a really great catch and shoot guy. One of the more consistent players the Sixers had throughout his tenure here. Just always shows up. You never have to worry about his effort, his intensity, whether you're on the road or at home. You always get the same Melton, right? The guy always shows up and he's consistent. Really great perimeter defender for his size. He's 6'2", but he really can guard almost 3 positions. You know what I mean? He is one of the best point of attack guys, 6'2" or under, in my opinion. So make sure you guys, if you're a fan of a team with some cap space, take a look at D'Anthony Melton, because this guy is a really great player that I think is going to get a big payday, and it's not going to be from the Sixers, which I'm upset about. The next guy, I cannot say a lot of the things I said D'Anthony Melton about. Tobias Harris, right? Sixers have had, let's just say, not a super pleasant experience with Tobias Harris over the 5 years he was here. Not really a fault of his, just the fault of his contract, right? And Tobias Harris, at the end of the day, I make jokes and everybody makes jokes, but this guy is a really talented player. He's got a great NBA size for a power forward. He's a dynamic offensive player. You know what I mean? He can get a shot in the mid-range a little bit. He's not the greatest at getting his own shot, but really good downhill transition player. You know what I mean? He's not, honestly, he's not super great at any one thing. He's just a really solid offensive player overall. I don't think he's a 3rd star type of guy, 2nd star type of guy, but he's just a good shooter from the outside. He's a great free throw shooter. He can get to the line okay. He can finish at the rim okay. Not a great athlete. He just does a lot of things pretty good, right? I think if you're a team like Detroit, who he's rumored to go to for a big payday, to reunite with them, I think, you're getting a pretty consistent overall talent. I don't mean consistent game to game, because that is one of his issues, but consistent in terms of his ability across the board. I think he's just a fine player at a lot of different things. And honestly, he's a good guy. He's a good locker room guy. He's a good veteran guy. Over his time with the Sixers, we've had some rough moments, like I said, but never had to question his integrity, his nothing like that. You know what I mean? He, from all accounts, appears to be a good locker room guy, and I think could help the Pistons quite a bit in that regard as a team that needs more veterans, right? So Tobias Harris, obviously a guy on the open market you want to pay attention to. Kelly Oubre Jr. is the final guy for the Sixers that I want to mention, because Kelly Oubre had a real breakout year in terms of, him being able to provide really quality minutes for a high-level basketball team, right? Like, that was something Kelly Oubre has failed to do throughout his career. No real fault of his own, quite frankly, but just wasn't on great teams before, or even playoff teams. I think, this was the first year Kelly Oubre played in the playoffs since he was with Washington early on in his career, and really took that role that Coach Nurse gave him of getting in passing lanes, right? Like, being a really good two-way player. Struggles with consistency issues himself, but he's an athletic, twitchy, two-way talent and wing that when he gets hot, he can be a real issue for the other team. Kelly Oubre is an interesting guy. I think his role is going to be different with every team he goes to, but can obviously do a lot of great things on the floor. And he's definitely a guy to consider in free agency. I think he gets a multi-year contract. 2 guards I want to mention, Gary Trent Jr. and Tyus Jones. These 2 guys are very different type of players. Tyus Jones obviously being a traditional, point guard that sets the table for the team. We all know about his, assist to turnover ratio, really great decision maker. Again, just a really solid role player. I think Tyus Jones is a little bit overvalued and undervalued at the same time by the NBA community. It's such a weird dynamic people have with him, but I think Tyus Jones is a really, really fine role player, and I think he should be good to make, upwards of 13 million, 15 million a year type money for a multi-year, 4-year, 5-year contract with whatever team he goes to. He can really, really help a team win, in my opinion. Really good shooter from that point guard position and an elite decision maker. He's never really going to wow you, but he's just a great stabilizer for a team that I think could really use one. Gary Trent Jr. being, a pretty solid, two-way perimeter guy, right? I think Gary Trent Jr. has a tendency to take some bad shots every now and then and maybe take a little bit too many shots if he wants to fit in with a really, really good team. But talk about a guy that gets in passing lanes. Gary Trent Jr. is a pretty good athlete, pretty good shooter, and overall a guy I think you should be paying attention to if you're in the market for a two-way perimeter guy. Similar to Kelly Oubre, right? Actually, those guys are really similar now that I think about it. We're getting close to the end, folks, I promise. Derrick Jones Jr. is, obviously a guy on the Mavericks right now in the Western Conference Finals. Thought he was a really, really interesting player. Really has transformed his game and been able to stay in rotations throughout the years. When he came in the league, he was a very raw, above the rim finisher type of guy that, obviously he can still do. He was just a pure athlete, lob threat type of guy that couldn't stay in a rotation because of his shooting, but has really been able to shoot the ball effectively with the Mavericks and has provided so much quality minutes with the Mavericks this season. It's unreal how good he's been for them. I think you got to keep him around if you're the Mavs, man. He's a dynamic two-way role player that you got to consider re-signing for a multi-year extension. Andre Drummond is the last guy on my list. I would love to have Andre Drummond back for a veteran minimum type deal with the Sixers as the backup 5 to Joel. He played so good here in that half a season he had here, and then we traded away him and Seth Curry and Ben Simmons for James Harden in that Ben Simmons trade. But listen, Andre Drummond I think is still a valuable backup 5 that could be a really, really good option for a team like Denver. I don't even want to think about that, but that's the type of guy they should look at, right? Still a rebounding machine. The dude is one of the greatest rebounders of this era, no question about it. Andre Drummond is a quality backup 5 that I think could be on the move from Chicago this offseason. That's about it for my list. Where do you think all these guys end up in their respective situations? Who do you think the best player that's likely to be on the market is? Do you think it's LeBron James? Do you think he's going to leave LA? Do you think it's Paul George? What do you think happens? Let me know all that stuff down in the comments. I'd love to hear your guys' insight and input. I love basketball, man. We upload content just like this every single day on this channel, so if you guys don't want to miss any of that, make sure you guys subscribe. We cover off-season stuff, playoff stuff. The playoffs are still going on right now. We're going to be doing Olympic stuff in the off-season in the summer. Every day basketball content from a guy that's just passionate about the game, and hopefully my Sixers can score a lot of these top guys, because we're really going to need it, man. With all the players we're losing and all the cap space we have, we better land Paul George or LeBron. I'm going to be so happy if it's LeBron. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, man. Make sure you guys drop a like on it if you did. It really helps out the channel, means a lot to me. Like I said, I love hearing from you guys, man. Let me know down in the comments what you think about this video. Who's your favorite team's free agent, best free agent in the offseason? Where do you think they're gonna go? Are you disappointed if they're gonna leave? Let me know all that stuff, man. I love talking to you guys in the comments. You guys are the best, man. Thank you guys for all the support, and hopefully your favorite team doesn't have one of these top guys in free agency that they have to worry about, and if they do, hopefully your favorite team has as much cap space as my favorite team. I will catch you guys in the next one. This is your boy D Haven. As always, peace.